Well, good morning, everybody. It's Friday, the 10th of March, 2023, and we are episode 87 of Retuning Your Firm. And for those of you who haven't been on the show before, we invite a guest, in this case, James Stringer, and he then talks about a topic for about 5 minutes, and then we engage in a debate with myself and my co-host, Francesca Lagerberg. And today's theme, as you'll see from the slide in front of you, is preparing for large new competitors, which I suppose is another way of talking about disruption. But anyway, this is me. Welcome, and I hope you're all enjoying your day. And what we're going to do next is just quickly, before I introduce Francesca and before I introduce the panel, just quickly talk about what we're going to be what today's talk is all about. As you probably know, Deloitte Legal has grown from a handful to hundreds of people in a few years. And some of the reasons that we're going to hear about a bit more about is in the ability to invest in tech, to transform delivery of legal services, a more entrepreneurial culture, and somebody who is unashamedly sales focused. And as I thought James will explain, they do have a pretty sort of ambitious project to actually break up a market that they perceive as not meeting many buyers' needs. So we'll welcome James in a minute. He is the former BD director of Deloitte Legal, has some other interesting things in his career as well. And he's going to talk about some really how management teams in pretty much any profession can prepare for these new large competitors. And it could be PE, it could be, as I said, a big four. And areas that I think we're going to be focusing on today are innovation, collaboration, tech focused, and of course, sales. Today's panel, as I mentioned, it'll be James, myself, and Francesca. And before I introduce Francesca, just quickly to remind you that there are lots of people watching, hundreds in fact, watching the videos. We're doing a lot on social media around videos from past shows, which are getting a lot of views, so that's great. Lots of mentorships again under Mentor Match, and we'd encourage you to be both mentor and a mentee if you are sort of in that space where you could be either. And the next Sector Trends quarterly tracker will be open for submissions in the fortnight that kind of straddles the end of this month. And with a lot of firms, I think we've got 95 firms who are now on the research panel. But if your firm is interested in joining that research panel and contributing to a very important piece of research, which was obviously shared with government, but also appeared in CCAM consultancy and Legal Law Society Gazette for the last one, and no doubt we'll get lots of great coverage for this one too. So that's probably enough from me for the moment. So if I may, I will now hand over to Francesca, who's going to talk to you about our guest for today. Over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Lovely to be with you all. I'm Francesca Lagerberg, Global CEO of Baker Tilly International, and I'm delighted to introduce James. As you heard from Richard, James was at the forefront of the setting up of the BD side of Deloitte Legal, and also has worked in Magic Circle firms before that. So as he would describe it, a bit of old law, a bit of new law. So it'd be fascinating to hear both of those sides of it. He's now involved in consulting services, taking all that wisdom and helping legal firms really respond to these new competitors coming into the market. And I think as we listen to James, we'll see how some of that disruption thematic plays out in many other parts of the professional services world. And we always like to ask our guests to tell us something that we might not know from their LinkedIn profile. And James has got a lovely one for us. He was publishing director at Wisdom, that cricketing almanac, which many of you may have pored over in the past. So with no further ado, let's hand over to James, who's going to take you through some of the learning from having those large competitors move into a market. Over to you, James.
Great. Thanks very much, Francesca. Thanks very much, Richard. So hello, everyone. So I'm conscious that not everyone on this call today is going to be a leader in a law firm. But I think that's a good thing, because I think a bit of perspective is needed. And Francesca has already set the scene that disruption is happening within other professional service markets. So that hopefully these reflections and the discussion will be useful. My suspicion, having worked in a number of large international law firms over the last 14 years, is that there's a Kodak-like complacency existing when it comes to the Big Four. And the Big Four and legal services are the topic I'm going to be referring to, but hopefully there will be some parallels for other industries that we can talk about after this short talk. Many law firm leaders, I think that the Big Four and law, that's not a threat to me. But I suspect that audit, accounting, consulting, financial advisory, and risk advisory firm management teams felt pretty much the same in the past. And the Big Four, of course, dominate most of those markets now. Now, the truth is that the Big Four are already big players in the legal market, and many law firm management teams either don't realize that or are choosing to ignore it. You can't be precise as to how large their revenues are if you combined all of the Big Four, the legal arms of the Big Four globally, but it's probably approximating $1 billion globally annually. Now, for the legal market, and I heard this repeatedly when I was at Deloitte Legal. Often I would hear, "Well, they've tried before, and they failed then. So what's going to be different this time?" But naturally, all big firms, when they are entering markets, have the ability to learn. And there are also signs of change within the wider legal market, which I suspect is probably prevalent in other professional service markets as well, which I think mean that at least in the legal market, that they have a better chance of succeeding this time, getting a bigger slice of the pie. I've often reflected, particularly of the legal market, that the truism that consumers expect services to get better, faster, and cheaper every year doesn't seem to hold sway in the legal market, and I'm not quite sure how much longer that can actually remain the case. Now, the Big Four don't all see the opportunity for the legal market in the same way. Deloitte Legal and PwC Legal definitely see legal services as being sort of central to their offering, a kind of law firm plus model, whereas KPMG and EY Law are really doubling down on transformation services. And why, I suppose, the question is, why do the Big Four bother about the legal market, despite the fact that it's obviously a very rich market and very large? Well, they keep persevering, I think, because they see that that the current setup of law firms are not really meeting all of the needs that buyers of legal services actually want. Client research that I saw indicate really that solutions are what clients want, and rather than just the black letter law. And law firms, by and large, don't seem to be interested in actually delivering the solutions that clients need. So I think an arms race is going on where it comes to tooling up with the weapons that you are going to need if you're going to provide the solution, these legal solutions, these holistic solutions for clients. So let's just quickly see how the two protagonists, old law and new law, match up. So on the new law side, the Big Four have the credibility around consultants, technology leaders, and managed service provision. They've got that in the bag. Have they got the reputation yet for high quality, trustworthy legal services? Probably not yet, but I think they're getting closer. You know, they are hiring good people. You see that in the trade press, every week. Big law firms have the opposite challenge. They're definitely well respected for legal services, but do they have the credibility around management, consultancy, technology leaders, and managed service providers that would the Big Four have a sort of natural brand permission for? Not yet, although very interestingly, for example, DLA recently hired a team of 10 data scientists. So that's an example of the Big Four cooling up, as I would put it. So it's too early to tell, in my opinion, who is going to win. But I think if you are a law firm in law firm management, you should be thinking about how you are acquiring the tools that you are going to need to compete. So if you buy my argument that that buyers do want legal services done differently, what are the challenges that old law faces from new law, and what should they be doing to respond? So I think firstly, the challenges can be summed up in three ways. It's culture, client, and cash. So in comparison to any law firm I've ever worked, Deloitte's culture helps explain its success. And I think that is a key ingredient when you're looking at a big competitor coming into the market. What is the culture and what allows them to succeed? Deloitte, of course, is a firm that foremost helps its clients solve its problems, but it's also much less squeamish about selling. And that is a fact known from the most junior analyst to the most senior partner. There's an agility that comes with a sales mindset. I was there through COVID, and it's a matter of public record that Deloitte provided a lot of support to the UK government in its COVID response. None of that existed before January 2019, but they have the confidence and ability to get the right people in the room, create solutions to client problems. Clients are the ace in the Big Four's pack, really. Their client relationships are far better than even the best networked law firm. So if they can get the brand permission to provide legal services, then they are already inside the door and an ability to sell the services that they offer. Partners at the Big Four are not all expected to do everything. Many of the most senior partners don't do any billable work. They invest their time working with and building out the relationships with maybe one or two clients, and are judged on that. And because they are given the time, then they are successful. And of course, one of the other benefits of spending a lot of time with a client is you learn an awful lot about their business and can uncover opportunities for your firm. But you also get a better understanding of the industry and can then take that insight to similar clients to solve their problems. And so a sector-led approach at the Big Four really means something. And the final challenge, I think, is the one about investing for success in the future. Now, of course, the Big Four are bigger firms than the law firms, than any of the law firms. But many of the law firms have higher PEC than even PwC and Deloitte, and so therefore are still very rich organizations. But in my experience, it's an attitude thing. Deloitte will invest in ideas, for example, that need technology or people or need marketing spend to bring alive. And they're very good at leveraging existing technology, not developing new technology. They're not interested in developing new technology, but leveraging existing technology like Salesforce or even HiQ, which is a legal market staple, to create solutions for clients, which they can then sell in. So in effect, they have R&D. They spend money on R&D, and very few law firms seem to do that. So finally, how should law firms, how should you respond if a new large competitor is threatening your market? Well, it's hard to generalize, but I think these 5 things are important. And I think you need to start talking to your partnership to make sure that they are thinking, contributing ideas, and supporting the change programs that are needed. So the first point is about investing in new ways of delivering services. That might be through technology, that might be through locating people in cheaper locations, or even not using fee earners at all to help deliver the services. I think you need to be confident in developing specific solutions for client problems. You need to be ambitious. You need to be confident, and you need to be unafraid of actually hiring people who are not fee earners. You need to invest in R&D. That involves innovation programs because you need ideas that you want to be able to back. You'll need to sharpen your sales force and invest time in partner relationships. And finally, you need to become more market sensitive, and that could be investing in support teams to help, in research capabilities so that you can actually surface these problems and do something with them, identify the bold plays. So in conclusion, if you're in an upscale finance law firm or you're in a mega M&A firm, then you may be immune to the Big Four. But if you're not, then change could be happening very soon, and I think it's best to be prepared. So, Francesca, there endeth the lesson. I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you, James. Wonderful. Really nice encapsulation of some of the challenges when you've got big disruption. And I think many people listening here will have a mixture between being perhaps in that space where they're feeling disrupted or are being disrupted in other ways by other people coming into their market. So maybe if I can start with a few questions around when you were BD lead at Deloitte Legal, when you looked at your market, what made you think that you could be a disruptor? What did you see that made you think this is just ripe for the taking? Because I think that perhaps is the piece that maybe others aren't seeing.
Well, I think unashamedly, we had a managing partner who had spent a lot of time within a Magic Circle law firm and had been speaking to very large institutional clients very regularly, and would regularly hear from the buyers of those services that they were not unhappy with the quality of the work. Of course, the lawyers, deliver brilliant work of the very highest quality, but they were unhappy really that there didn't seem to be much development in how those services were delivered. Unlike in most other parts of businesses, outsourcing or technology to speed things up or to do things, kind of improve the quality, were not really being applied by the very largest law firms. And so therefore, the managing partner, Michael Castle, felt that there was an opportunity here with the right brand, with the right investment. If there's a client need, then, a solution, if you can create it and you have brand permission, then you should be at the races.
And there's something very interesting about how you respond to competitors in a market, particularly when you've got a model that doesn't feel broken, but perhaps is becoming outdated. It is the Kodak moment. You actually know what the future is, but you aren't doing anything about it. So for those people listening who perhaps haven't got huge resources for the R&D side, for that piece, and are perhaps kind of confused or concerned about, that not everything you're going to invest in is going to work. How do you feel there's help for people there to go? Where do you play? Where do you try and win if you just don't quite know how to fix your model?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think there's a number of challenges which I've only worked in law firms, but I haven't seen lots of ideas floating around within law firms. And I speak to others who do research on clients, and they ask clients a question: when was the last time that you heard about an innovation? And clients really struggle to identify when that was. So I think the question is not necessarily where do you invest. I think what you have to do is generate the ideas to start with, because I think if you haven't got the ideas coming and bubbling up, then this is an irrelevant question, because you may have money to invest, but if you've got nothing to invest in, then you haven't got any R&D. So I think actually it's a relatively cheap thing to do. I think it's about having innovation programs within your firm, and those can be cheap and they can be simple and kind of low complexity. So for example, at one of the firms I worked for, they had a panel called I2, which was an innovation panel, whereby people in the firm could come to that panel, pitch an idea, and seek funding. And that funding could have been as simple as permission to put less billable hours targets, for example, to actually stimulate ideas. So I think that's a simple, cheap way of doing it. I think in your training, putting development time into people in terms of how to innovate and think creatively about client problems. There's lots of we offer training. I'm involved with an organization. We can offer training around innovation, for example. But that's a way of, again, stimulating, giving younger professionals permission that it's okay to have new ideas. And so therefore, I think if you can then get those bubbling up, you can then put structure on it, and then you can decide what your investment appetite is like. It may be a case, well, we invest in 2 good ideas a year, and that's £100,000, or that's 100,000 of billable time written off, etc. But I think if you don't have those ideas, then you're sort of looking around at what your peers are doing and trying to copy that, which they might be in the different markets, they might have different structure, they might have different ownership, they might have a different ability to invest.
Maybe I can pop in now with a question. I think the word that I am coming out with today is solution, because I don't think the word solution is one that most lawyers are very familiar with, almost, because they think about providing services rather than solutions. So I think that's a mindset which possibly is very different between the two professions. The other one which I was quite interested in was your observation around certain very senior partners are effectively given the space, time, if you like, to really invest in those clients, to get to know them. Because the truth is, going back to your ideas, most of the ideas will actually come from clients. I mean, my sort of neuroscience observation, if you like, is that what professional services firms do is help clients convert their client insights into action. Because unless the client wants to do something, it probably won't happen. I mean, all right, audit maybe, and certain things are regulatory, you have to do, but they're few and far between. You don't make as much money on them. But actually, if you really want to help a client, it's helping that client with ideas. So how do you think a law firm can get under the skin of their client and actually understand what those ideas are?
Very good. Another good question, Richard. Can I just make an observation again on the differences actually between, say, consulting and law firms, which is about your point around problems. I think consultants think about developing a solution to solve a client problem, and then they immediately think, right, who else can I sell this to? Someone else who's got the same problem. I will go out and convince them that the problem is worth investing in. Whereas I think, of course, the legal market has by and large had the luxury of clients phoning up with a problem that needs fixing. So therefore, I think it's quite, it's a subtle but different mindset. Well, I think the reality is, how do partners have to just spend, or other senior people just have to spend more time with clients? All the research say that clients actually want to spend time with professionals who can help them do their job better. What the research more often says is, well, they phone me up infrequently. They're sort of trying to see whether there's any work going at the moment, and that doesn't feel as comfortable as it might do as if they stayed in touch with me much more regularly. We had a wider discussion about the business. They brought a gift to me around, here's knowledge and insight that I've got about a challenge that's coming up, or here, a similar client had the same sort of situation. Is this relevant for you? Clients like that, of course. And so therefore, I think the problem is probably one of clients. It's not that clients aren't receptive. I think it's more that, particularly in the legal market, that billable targets are very high. That's what billable revenue is a metric that is most commonly used as a sign of success, rather than what does your pipeline look like? How many deals? What's coming? What are you learning from that client? How many new services have you introduced, etc.? Which are the metrics, are sort of a more balanced scorecard that the Big Four uses. I hope that's answered your question. Sorry, Richard, you're on mute.
Richard, you're on mute. Yeah.
Going to say it was a really, it's a really good insight, because I think, as you say, a lot of these big firms are, well, you used the word complacent at the beginning, but one of the outcomes of complacency is you get silos being created and different bits of the firm. Talking about that, Francesca, just perhaps bring your thoughts in as the CEO of a big accountancy network, where in the way you're encouraging your member firms around the world to be more innovative, to be more competitor aware. And what are the sort of, in many ways, what you're doing is very similar to the management team of a bigger firm. How do you actually get those messages over, do you find?
Right. A lot of what James has just said really resonates for me, in that it is creating an environment where you have a bit of freedom to innovate. Because I think one of the challenges you have is it's very easy to get into a model and do what you did last year and the year before that. And before you know it, life has passed you by. And if you look in the accounting profession at the moment, disruption is everywhere. There's aggregation, there's consolidation, there's PE houses, there's capital coming in from different sources, there's looking at listings. It's probably been the most volatile that I can remember for maybe a decade and a half. And that's when I think you get a rabbit in the headlights moment for many firms, where they're going, I know we're not quite doing what we need to do, but I'm not quite sure where to go next. So I think there is something there about teaching that art of innovation, something that we do a lot about. How do you actually have to get profitable, sustainable growth? It isn't always the same answer. It isn't always the same solution. But it really just amplifying what you said, James, around talking to clients. Nearly all your great ideas come from clients, and it is about replicating them for other clients. Very rarely has a client got a unique problem. Occasionally, but it's really rare. Usually it's quite a common problem that perhaps hasn't been articulated in that way before. And just the fact of being able to get under the skin, spending the time, not spending all your time clocking every 15 minutes that you do on your fees, and having relationship partners, people who really are brilliant at relationships and are given the freedom to get those relationships to really understand, because it's like every human relationship, isn't it? If you don't spend time with somebody, if you don't get to really understand the business, you're just speeding out a bunch of products. And they're going, yeah, that's really so uninteresting to me, because this is my problem. This is the thing I'm passionate about. Why are you talking to me about all this other stuff? This is what I want to know about. So I think there's something very powerful there about that empathy with clients and that client experience piece, which then generates some of that thought-making process. But I think there is an intriguing bit about age in partnerships. And I hate to say that all older partners are set in their ways, because that's so not true. It's a mental mindset. But presumably you, James, have seen people who are just blockers to change, because they've always done it this way. They're always going to do it that way. How do you break through that piece? How do you kind of get people into a different space where they're
Well,
looking at change in a different way?
I've had the pleasure of working with some management teams who, on the face of it, you would have thought would have been very conservative, but actually surprise me, maybe themselves, when they have a constituency of say partners who are pushing from below. You know, again, this innovation idea. If they're coming with good ideas, you know, you only need to have one success, and then all of a sudden, you know, the keys that they're given, the keys of the king to the kingdom. And so therefore, I think, I think you just have to be, I suppose the right people have to be put in place, but ultimately you need to have the right people underneath. The other thing I was just going to quickly add, Francesca, to point about innovation, is that you are absolutely right. Of course, client has a problem. It's brought back to the hive. Someone is sort of interested and thinks there might be something here. I think what is also needed are people who can then make that happen, because I'm not sure it's fair to expect a fee-earning partner to suddenly be a brilliant person at bringing an innovative idea to market. It's a different skill. You're not trained on it, and so therefore, again, an investment in people, who are good at what is needed to bring an idea to fruition is, I think, really important. But again, that's a mindset thing. That's a cost. That is a cost that a firm has to bear. But ultimately, it's going to lead to a much higher chance of success, I think.
Can I just pick up one question, which is around culture? Because if I go back to what you were talking about of where the challenges are when comparing old and new law, if you like, one of them was that the culture that a Deloitte, a Big Four, brings is very distinct from the one that is typical in a traditional law firm. Changing culture is, talk about change. Mindset's one thing. Changing culture is a whole different ballpark. But where would you start if you've realised that your culture wasn't possibly in the right place?
Well, I think it has to start with who you hire at the bottom. You have to. Again, my experiences of large international law firms is that they're a pretty homogenous group that are being hired at the bottom. There is not a lot of diversity of thought. It's improving in terms of them. Gender is good generally. Ethnicity maybe improving, but things like neurodiversity, again, the Big Four are thinking a lot about neurodiversity and getting people with different skills. They'll have different roles, but they will have real talents, making the best of that. So therefore, I think it has to start at the bottom. But if you're hiring a trainee or an analyst to come into your business, and you've got a clear innovation program, and this is being celebrated, that is the thing that will attract different kinds of people. If you don't have those things,
I'm going to have to interrupt you there,
no
because
problem.
we're literally into the last few seconds.
No
but I'd like to thank you, James, reminding us that the Big Four are already doing $1 billion annually in legal, probably, which is a pretty big number. That there's quite a lot of complacency at the moment at the Magic Circle. That law is one of the few sectors where getting better, faster, cheaper doesn't seem to be the case. That it's really an arms race at the moment in terms of legal solutions. that you need to be thinking about your culture, you need to be thinking about your clients and the sectors, and also in terms of innovating in the future. So what are you going to do about it? Invest in new ways of delivering services, R&D, sharpen up your sales force, replicate the services, and become more market sensitive, all in the next space of the next half an hour, no doubt. But seriously, it's quite a big task that we're setting ourselves. So thank you, Francesca, for joining us. We're back in a couple of weeks. This time we're looking at HR and understanding what are some of the people issues. And thank you, James, again for joining us for, I thought, a really fascinating, insightful conversation around how you might deal with large competitors. So thank you again. Bye for now.